Hello and welcome to the Flourishing Introvert Talks with me, Jo Rawbone. This is the podcast that celebrates the natural gifts of introverts so that we can flourish in all situations. Episode 329. Vulnerability Hangover? What will people think? It's fair to say that pretty much every introvert I've ever met, let alone worked with, values their independence and even prides themselves on their resourcefulness. Let's face it, the more you can figure out and do on your own, the less forced interaction there needs to be. Many of us can even trot out a selection of handy explanations to justify our behaviour, like, I'm respectful of other people's time, I know people are busy, and I like to understand how things work, even though I don't need to. I blame that one on my engineering background. And even, I can do this on my own, which is just a form of bull-headed defiance rather than positive thinking. Now, I have felt this and used those explanations for most of my life, and it's only recently that I've been able to unpack it. Once it was laid out bare before me, I could finally see what was actually going on, and it wasn't pretty. Vulnerability. But not a fear of being vulnerable in my case, although I don't like to appear weak to anyone. Interesting that, isn't it? How I immediately associate vulnerability with weakness, when in reality it is anything but. More on that later though. What I struggle with more, far more, to the point of developing a real aversion, is what comes afterwards, the vulnerability hangover. This term, coined I think by Brené Brown, perfectly describes the wave of regret, shame or anxiety that washes over us when we have shared too much. You may not have known the label before, but I'm pretty sure you will have had some or all of the feelings. The embarrassment, the squirmy awkwardness, and the regret when you ask yourself, rather unkindly, why on earth did I share that? How could I have asked for their help? And, Lordy Dee Dee, what have I done? These questions follow a moment or moments of honest sharing, of daring to be visible, of being exposed emotionally and energetically in the case of we introverts. So it can be triggered by being more open, more truthful and more authentic than you'd bargained for. And we wonder why it feels safer to keep our authenticity under wraps. The whole subject of a vulnerability hangover is very present for me right now. In fact, I've only just emerged from its grip. You see, last weekend I needed to collate information about my business to share with a business mentor. The process encouraged and enabled me to be far more honest with myself than I have ever been. And this was important as I needed to be honest with the mentor. I mean, let's face it, there's really no point otherwise, is there? Crikey, I can feel my face flush as I'm thinking and saying this right now. And that's something I used to suffer really badly with as a teenager and a young adult. Seems I'll never really grow out of it. As introverts, oversharing is not our usual MO. We're not known for dumping emotional glitter bombs on people. So we're more likely to be unclear about where the line is as to what acceptable is. In reality, what we think of as oversharing is simply other people's normal, but that doesn't always make it easier to bear. And when it comes to asking for help, we'll usually try everything else before going that route. I nearly said everything else before lowering ourselves, like not needing help is some kind of lofty ideal. It is not. In fact, I'll go as far as to say not asking for help just before you really need it is foolish. I wonder how many hours I've wasted trying to figure things out on my own when a quick question or request would have served us all better. I dread to think. Interestingly, I've just seen a couple of social media posts about the problem many have with saying, "I don't know." When did the expectation surface that we should know everything about everything? I've yet to meet the person who does, although many will try to blag that they do. I certainly didn't get the memo that that's a thing, yet it's in the collective consciousness for sure. So I said I'd come back to talk about how I'd associated vulnerability with weakness. And again, I know I'm not the only one who does this. In fact, on a recent call as part of a group program, a couple of people questioned, disbelievingly, why I even thought vulnerability was a good thing. They shared their reasoning by suggesting that the opposite of vulnerability was strength. Another indication that people associate being vulnerable with being weak. And I wonder if there is a particular layering for we introverts on this, as much of what has been thrown our way implies that we are weaker than the more outgoing, outwardly confident types. So we armour up, tool up, and pull the drawbridge up in order not to allow other examples of perceived weakness to be evident. This aligns so well with what I said the opposite of being vulnerable was, if it wasn't strength. And curiously, my opposite is being present. Now, I realise I might need to explain that, as I was surprised too. I have usually felt very present when being vulnerable, but now I have been able to clarify that I was only present to myself. Present to what was going on in my mind, my body, and in my soul. I love how my understanding of myself unfolds with every twist and turn in life, if I allow it. Confirmation again that we are all work in progress. I was also asked during that group program what the experience of a vulnerability hangover was like for me, so I thought I'd share that here, given that I've just mentioned how being vulnerable impacts my whole being. Some of you may well recognise what I'm about to share. Alongside the replaying of events in my mind and the catastrophising about how people would be judging me as a result, I can experience nausea, exhaustion, shortness of breath, all with a crushing headache that springs from nowhere. You see, I imagine people will be judging me as being unprofessional, a fraud, which must mean I've destroyed any credibility and trust I have worked so hard to build. Emotionally, I feel tender, bruised even, raw, and overwhelmingly embarrassed. Shame sometimes accompanies these feelings, but not always, I've noticed. Fortunately, it's not always about me being a bad person. What's interesting is what I do or don't do in some cases when suffering with this kind of hangover. And this too is not always consistent, but there will likely be a combination of behaviours that I and others who know me well may observe. First and foremost, I'll withdraw. And just like a wounded animal, I'll take myself somewhere quiet to metaphorically lick my wounds. And if I can withdraw or take back my moment of vulnerability, I will, which might mean deleting a post or trying to recall an email. But most things are not recoverable in the same way that, will the jury please disregard that last statement, never truly works. People can't unsee what they have seen, or unhear what they have heard, or deny the emotional impact they have felt. But here's the reality. they are unlikely to have judged me as harshly as I had first imagined, or as harshly as I have judged myself. I've recently been talking about being discerning regarding who gets to experience what level of my self. The 3 levels I've settled on are public, personal, and the tender, sacred level. In order to be able to share, to ask, and to express myself authentically, I need to be pretty sure that I won't experience a vulnerability hangover. Or at least I have the space and capacity to manage the fallout. So in reality, those who get the public and maybe even the personal level of me probably won't get to witness the really vulnerable me. And if being vulnerable really does result in a thumper of a hangover, as in my case recently, I need to be sure that whoever got to witness it knows how to hold the space well enough for me to process it and to be able to recover from it, enabling me to feel safe while I experience my whole gamut of emotions. I consider myself so fortunate to be surrounded by those who know and care for me deeply enough that I was neither shamed into minimizing the whole experience nor ridiculed for being stupid to go there in the first place. I was heard and held and loved in all the right ways. Thank you to those of you who provided that safe harbour for me. You know who you are, and I know you listen. So, my friends, I want you to accept that vulnerability is not a weakness, nor is it foolish. In my experience, it is the result of a whole range of things colliding in unexpected ways. And if the most common cause of your vulnerability and the resultant hangover comes as a result of oversharing, here are a couple of questions to ask yourself that may prove helpful. Firstly, am I sharing to discharge my discomfort or connect in order to gain clarity? And secondly, where is the most appropriate place to share? We may be introverts who prefer our privacy, but keeping things bottled up is rarely the answer. If you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, then please subscribe, rate us and leave a comment, because we know that helps other people find the podcast. And if other people find us, other introverts can flourish.
You are listening to an Intentional Media Production podcast.